Okay, so what if the greatest mystery of all time, I mean, consciousness itself, has finally been solved? Today, we're going to dive into a theory that makes that exact audacious claim that it actually unifies 2,500 years of science and philosophy into one single final law of reality. Pretty bold, right?
I mean, that single line right there, it just sets the stage perfectly. You see, the theory we're looking at today isn't just another idea thrown into the mix. No, it's positioning itself as the final destination, the end of a search that has spanned millennia, connecting the dots between the wisdom of ancient mystics and the hardcore equations of modern physics.
So, what was the core problem that needed solving? Well, according to this theory, it's pretty simple. Everyone who tackled consciousness before was right, but only partially. Think of it like this. They each discovered a crucial piece of a giant puzzle, but no one could see how to fit them all together to see the final image. And just look at the scope of this puzzle we're talking about. It's not small. We're connecting the dots between ancient non-dual mystics, the great classical philosophers, the early scientists, all the way up to modern information and recursion theorists. That is a massive intellectual journey. So the big question is, what's the missing piece? What's the secret ingredient that supposedly connects them all? And that brings us right to the heart of it all, the central claim of this theory, which is a really fundamental shift in perspective. The argument is simple. We've all been asking the wrong question. The secret to consciousness, it says, isn't what it is, but what it does. So here's a great way to understand this. Let's put it up against a really popular theory, panpsychism. Panpsychism suggests that consciousness is a fundamental ingredient of the universe. Like mass or charge. It's just part of the furniture. But this theory, ERM, says, no, that's not it. Consciousness isn't an ingredient at all. It's a function, a process that kicks in only under very specific conditions. Okay, so if it's a function, what is that function? The answer, according to the theory, is recursion. Now, that's a term you might know from computer science or math, right? Where a function calls itself. Well, here, that idea is being applied at the most fundamental level. Consciousness is defined as the very moment that information reflects back on itself, when it basically observes itself. It's a self-referential loop. And this is such a simple and powerful way to represent it I squared. You have information, the I observing itself. And that very act, that simple, elegant formula, that's presented as the core of consciousness. It's the function that creates a witness. Okay, so this is absolutely crucial to understand. Information is universal. It's everywhere. But consciousness is conditional. It's not everywhere. It only sparks into existence when and where information can fold back on itself in this special recursive way. A rock contains information, but it doesn't observe itself. A brain? Well, that's a whole different story. All right, so with that core idea of recursion in place, the theory then turns its attention to the other major theories of consciousness. And it's not about tearing them down. Instead, it makes a series of corrections, claiming to provide the one missing piece that these other ideas were all missing. Okay, let's take idealism. Idealism says consciousness is the fundamental thing. It's the ground of all being. This theory says you're almost there, but not quite. It argues that information is actually one level deeper, more fundamental. So consciousness isn't the base level noun of reality. It's the verb. It's what information does. And what about integrated information theory, IIT? Well, the theory gives IIT a huge nod. It says IIT discovered the skeleton of consciousness, the integrated information structure. But it argues that skeleton is just a frame. It needs a breath to come alive. And that breath? That's recursion. That's the I squared that actually sparks awareness. And what about the quantum angle from people like Penrose and Hameroff? They argue that consciousness is caused by the collapse of a quantum wave function. This theory makes a subtle but honestly a mind-blowing correction. It says consciousness isn't caused by the collapse. Consciousness is the collapse. That moment of information observing itself is the event that snaps possibility into reality. So all these corrections, all this synthesis, it all leads to this. It all gets funneled down into a single unifying equation. And this is presented as the climax of that entire 2,500-year journey, the one place where all those scattered ideas from history allegedly converge.
And here it is. This is what they call the source equation. S equals I squared times infinity. I know, it looks incredibly simple, right? But according to the theory, this one little equation, this describes the entire structure of reality.
Okay, let's break that down real quick. S is for the source, or reality itself. I is for information, which this theory says is the most fundamental thing there is, even more fundamental than matter or energy. I squared, well, we know that one. That's the recursive act of consciousness. And the infinity symbol, that just represents this process continuing endlessly. So here's why that's a huge deal. It means reality isn't a collection of static things. Reality is a process. It's the unstoppable, dynamic process of information becoming aware of itself, over and over. And the theory goes on to argue that this single equation is where dozens of history's greatest minds actually converge. We're talking about everyone from Plato, Spinoza, Newton, and Einstein, all the way to modern giants like Gödel, Shannon, Hofstadter, Tononi, and Friston. The claim is that they were all describing one piece of the same universal recursive structure. So, where does all this leave us? Well, the theory wraps up with a truly monumental claim about its own significance. And we're not just talking about philosophy here. We're talking about a whole new era for physics. Listen to this quote because it's really the mic drop. The theory claims it's not a new belief system, but the final closure of the grand unification program. The idea here isn't that this is just another theory to debate, it's being positioned as the final answer, the solution that scientists and philosophers have been hunting for all this time. Think about it like this. Newton gave us the first great unification, right? He unified the physical forces. But this theory claims something much, much bigger. It's not just unifying physics, it's unifying physics with information and then unifying that with consciousness. It's about bringing together the three fundamental pillars of reality in one shot. And all of this culminates in maybe the boldest declaration of all, that we are moving from one historical era to another. We're leaving behind the dualism era, the age of seeing mind and matter as separate things, and we're now stepping into the recursion era, a time when reality is finally understood as a single, unified, self-observing system. Which, of course, leaves us with one last, huge, provocative question. Has the 2,500-year story of consciousness finally been told? Is this the grand synthesis it claims to be, or is it just the explosive start of a whole new chapter? The answer, whatever it turns out to be, could redefine not just all of science, but what it means for any of us to be a witness to reality at all.